What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
It is Wednesday, January 9th, 2019, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday. And we have got lots to talk about. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, opinions, and observations here. Okay, Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer just finished their little meeting up on Capitol Hill trying to resolve the issue. Basically, they got nowhere. Trump came on out and said basically it was a waste of time. Again, this is a chest thumping who's really in charge here kind of contest, where Trump is simply saying, I will sign the spending bill when you put the money for the wall in there. And Pelosi and Schumer are out there saying, not $1 for a wall. And so really, it's a case of who's in control and who's going to win. And to heck with the harm that it's causing. It's already cost the country more in the partial government shutdown than it would have cost to build that portion of the wall here. Now, last night, as you know, Donald Trump did his first speech from the Oval Office to the American people. It was 8 minutes long. It was very succinct. And the networks were throwing up these little boxes underneath, fact check. Is he really right when he says this? Which I noticed they didn't do when Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer got up there. But Donald Trump basically came on up and said this is a choice between right and wrong, and that there's a humanitarian crisis down there at the border, but it's not of our making. And he's absolutely right there. Now, he did not declare an official state of emergency, but it looks like he was laying the groundwork to do just that. Now, Pelosi and Schumer, when they got their turn at bat, they got personal. They were blasting Trump, saying he was obsessed with the wall and saying the wall is cruel and that he's just throwing a temper tantrum. Of the two of them, Schumer had a better response. Pelosi just kind of just thrashed around, kind of lukewarm. She didn't really seem to have much of a focus going in there at all. And probably as a result of that, social media just went to town on Chuck and Nancy with all their humorous memes. And the funniest one I saw was one that was animated with Chuck Schumer in a hat and a beard and a pitchfork, and Nancy Pelosi in a little bonnet here. And behind their speech, they were basically tracking the overlays with the actual people. And they had the theme from Green Acres behind there, so that was a lot of fun. There was a lot of humor out there. They're making fun of the whole situation, and so yeah, social media really did not respond to Schumer and Pelosi. I did notice though that on the corporate media coverage of Trump's speech, immediately the comment section was loaded up with all kinds of comments bashing Trump, bashing the border wall, saying we've got to have open borders. I mean, can you say bought and paid for? I knew you could, children. I mean, it was that obvious here. Now, remember, only last year, the 2018 omnibus spending bill, provided $500 million to help Jordan build a wall. They funded a border wall in Jordan across its 287-mile border with Iraq and Syria. So all this talk about walls don't work. Well, they funded one for Jordan. They've certainly been funding one for Israel. That Berlin Wall worked pretty effectively at reducing the flow of people from east to west. The Great Wall of China certainly slowed down the Mongols. And here's a little interesting situation. Back in 2006, there was an act passed by Congress called the Secure Fence Act of 2006, and it passed Congress on a bipartisan basis. And it passed House of Representatives 283 to 138. The Senate was 80 to 19. And what this bill provided for was the construction of 700 miles of physical barriers between the Mexico and United States border. But in the end, only 36 miles of the fence was ever built. What happened to the rest of it? Where did that money go? And by the way, the people back then who voted in favor of the Secure Fence Act of 2006 was Sherrod Brown. She was in the House back then. She's now in the Senate. Thomas Carper, Dianne Feinstein, Bill Nelson, Chuck Schumer, Debbie Stabenow, Ron Wyder, and other Democrats who supported the bill in the Senate were Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Harry Reid, Senator Barack Obama. So why are they so opposed to the fence now? Well, because Trump is the president. And by golly, politics trumps national security. We just have to oppose anything Trump is doing. We can't let him have a success or we'll be in trouble in 2020. That's really what it's all about. The 2020 election campaign is already underway, and the Democrats' one job is to prevent Donald Trump from accomplishing anything that he can talk about going into 2020. That's how petty they have become. And, you know, too bad if Americans are losing their jobs to illegal immigrants who underbid them for employment. Too bad if Americans are getting ill from these contagious diseases that are being brought on in. Too bad if our social services are being strained by this huge glut of illegal immigrants. I think the Yale study said there's something like 25 million illegal immigrants in this country, the vast majority of whom are basically scarfing off the nation, getting free stuff. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. The corporate media, of course, didn't look at the content of Trump's speech. They just attacked him personally. Over at CNN, Jim Acosta tried to make a joke saying that Trump's speech needed a Surgeon General's warning because it was hazardous to the truth. Meanwhile, CNN's Don Lemon, the same one who said that they should time delay and then edit Trump's speech, was out there saying that, again, the network should delay the Trump address because people might actually believe him. You know, and that would be a terrible thing. Trump could get up there and say something and people might believe it, but I guess that's the risk you take when you have to deal with the president. Well, frankly, Don, that's the risk we take when we tune into CNN. Are we going to get the truth? We certainly didn't about things like Saddam's nuclear weapons, now did we? Meanwhile, Ocasio-Cortez is blasting the border wall, calling it a monument to hate. Or a monument to Trump. Same difference. Well, Ocasio, or Sandy, that's what she called herself when she was young. Sandy, listen to me for just a minute here. When I lock the door of my home at night, it's not because I hate my neighbors. It's because I love my wife. That's the difference here. Then Sandy, Ocasio-Cortez, came on out saying, believe it or not, she actually said this, illegal immigrants are more American than Trump supporters. How did this woman get elected saying things like that? Trump supporters are American citizens. The illegal immigrants are not. And for Sandy Ocasio-Cortez to say that illegal immigrants are more American than Trump supporters, it's ridiculous. It's completely unsupportable. And what's really amazing, though, is to look at all of these people who are attacking the border wall, who are attacking Donald Trump, who back in 2006, they were all in favor of it. They thought it was great. And again, back in 2006, talking about the Secure Fence Act, Barack Obama was out there saying the bill before us will certainly do some good. Hillary Clinton said, look, I voted numerous times when I was a senator to spend money to build a barrier to try and prevent illegal immigrants from coming in. And I do think you have to control your borders. That's Hillary Clinton, 2006. Back in Bill Clinton's 1995 State of the Union speech, he said all Americans were right to be disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering the United States, adding that illegal aliens impose burdens on the U.S. taxpayers. Now, Chuck Schumer, and there's actually a video out of him saying that, yes, he's in favor of secure borders. Shortly after voting in favor of the Secure Fence Act, basically did a speech at the Georgetown University Law Center. And he said that referring to illegal aliens as undocumented is unacceptable. They are illegal aliens, and illegal immigration is wrong, plain, and simple. When we use phrases like undocumented workers, we convey a message to the American people that their government is not serious about combating illegal immigration. In 2013, Nancy Pelosi, then House Minority Leader, referred to border security as a basic principle and urged Congress to support legislation to secure the U.S. border. Joe Biden said that we, meaning President Obama and himself, felt so strongly from the day we took office for the need for immigration reform in 2014. Basically, Biden continued by criticizing those who entered this country illegally. Imagine, I say, I got a good idea. Let's gather up everything we have, sell it, give it to some coyotes to take us into a country that doesn't want us, drop us off in God knows where. We don't know anybody. We leave everything that's familiar to us. Let's go. Isn't that going to be a great idea? These are horrible decisions these people are making. And we know, certainly in the case of the migrants in Europe, the reason they're making those decisions, they're being promised there's going to be free stuff at the other end of that path. And who knows what the illegal immigrants are being told to lure them into the United States of America. As long as you vote Democratic, you'll get free stuff. Won't have to work anymore. We'll put you on welfare, get you a driver's license and a voter registration card. Now, Donald Trump was right to include in his comments about the border fence the drug problem in the United States of America. And you need to remember that he's not proposing a wall between all of Mexico and the U.S., although that would certainly be appropriate. The U.S. southern border is approximately 2,000 miles, and the discussion is about 1,000 miles of physical barriers in regions that are heavily controlled by the drug cartels. Now, the Texas border is about 1,200 miles of the approximately 2,000 miles of the southern border. Most of that is the Rio Grande. So throw in a few crocodiles. We don't have to worry about that anymore. Mexico has numerous states under the direct influence of drug cartels. They have their own standing armies. They have access to RPGs, armored vehicles, artilleries, and explosives. A lot of that came through the Fast and Furious programs. And a lot of the most dangerous, violent drug cartels operate south of the Texas border. Over in Tijuana, they've got some of the highest murder statistics in all of Mexico. And most of the victims tend to be tied to drug trafficking. So Trump is absolutely right. If we want to get the drug problem under control in this country, one of the things that we have to do is close that border. Of course, that's not going to have any effect on those drug smugglers with aircraft, such as, for example, the Central Intelligence Agency. But it will help. It'll help a little bit here. Now, as I mentioned before, during Trump's speech, the corporate media were flashing up these little fact-check boxes. Oh, was he right on that? Oh, no, he wasn't. He wasn't. And CBS News, when Trump came on up and said that 1/3 of the migrant women were being raped while on their way up to our border, CBS immediately put up, fact check, he's wrong, it's wrong. It's actually 60 to 80% of the women who are being raped on the way. And then they realized that actually sold Trump's point, and they pulled it down again. So they got hoisted with their own petard there. Polls are showing that Americans agree there's a problem down there at the border. And over at Breitbart, they had a survey saying that 42% of voters say the U.S. is facing a crisis, while only 37% say the U.S. is facing a problem, according to this poll, which was conducted with Politico. Now, notice the very subtle way they have of keeping the numbers down. They split it. Instead of saying, is there a problem or not, or is there a crisis or not, they say, is it a crisis or a problem or not? So they split the numbers. So they get 42 for crisis, 37 for facing a problem. Okay? But that makes a 79% of Americans say there is an issue with that southern border that has to be dealt with. 79%. Are the Democrats listening? Of course not. They love the illegal immigrants. They can swindle them into voting Democrat anytime they want. Okay, now the former director of Immigration Customs Enforcement basically responded to Alexandria or Sandy Ocasio-Cortez for claiming immigrant children died in ICE custody. And basically, he came on out saying that every time she opens her mouth, she's wrong. First of all, the child in question was 8-year-old Felipe Gomez Alonso, who died in the custody of the Border Patrol, not the Immigration Customs Enforcement. And Border Patrol did everything they could to save the child's life. He was in bad shape. Now, here's where I come from that. If there is somebody to blame for the death of that child, it is the parents who made that choice to leave behind their home, leave everything, sell everything, go to the U.S. because somebody had told them if you get up there and vote Democratic, you're going to get all kinds of free stuff. If anybody bears the blame for the death of that child or any of the other children who are dying on that path to the United States, it is those parents who are making a poor choice. Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came on out on MSNBC saying that Trump is anti-American for not letting in every foreigner who wants to come. I think we need to go back and recount those ballots in her election. I can't imagine people actually voting for somebody this dumb. And she came on out again and said that Trump is forcing illegal immigrants to be illegal by not giving them legal status as soon as they step across the border. It's utterly, utterly ridiculous. Okay, let's see. You're coming across the border, and what do you do? Well, I'm with MS-13. I'm here to sell drugs to your teenage kids. Okay, here's your legal status. Just get on in. All right, let's take a phone call here. Art off the grid. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'm kind of curious. I was listening to talk radio earlier today, and there was some talk about, I don't know, I can't recall the name of the group, but apparently there's a group of some kind of organization over there in France that are trying to instigate the people into a run on the banks.
It's now, the Yellow Vests. It's the Yellow Vests, and it's for this weekend.
And now we know what happened in 1929 right here in the United States when the run on the banks. This was when the banks called in all their loans, and of course nobody had the money, so everybody was rushing to try to close out their accounts, and this is what caused the big butt kick for the Great Depression. So now I'm kind of curious if the yellow jackets, yellow vests, or whatever the heck you want to call them, seems like nobody can decide whether to call them yellow jacket, yellow vest, or yellow coats. Well, call them whatever you want. If they are successful and are able to instigate a run on the banks this weekend, or this week, how do you think that will affect the global economy?
Well, it's already had an effect on the euro. The euro's already dropping. People think that there may actually be something because the yellow vests are enjoying a huge amount of popular support. Now, your understanding of the crash of 29 is a little bit flawed. What initiated the event was the crash of the stock market. That led the stock market to send out the margin calls to ordinary citizen investors. They didn't have it, and that's what began to bring the whole pyramid down. Anyway, listen, Art, stay on the line. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll bring you right back after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Art off the grid, and we're talking about the fact that the Yellow Vests are calling for basically the French people to pull their money out of the French banks this coming weekend. And the Yellow Vests are taking a bit of a gamble here because if nobody does pull their money out, if it's just a fizzle, that's going to undermine the idea that they have a lot of popular support. But apparently this is going all over social media, and they're trying to build some momentum toward this. If it does look like a lot of people are getting ready to pull their money out, Macron may be forced to take some draconian action, like shutting down social media or simply ordering the banks to stay closed and not respond to withdrawals, either one of which would damage him politically as well. So this is getting to be a real intense situation over there in France.
You know, we know that when the stock market crashed in 1929, 1930, and we went into the Great Depression, that was basically pretty much just, it was contained within the United States because we didn't have the global economy like we have today.
Yes.
So I'm kind of curious, when we hear people talk about if the U.S. economy tanks, you know, the whole world's economy is going to come crashing down. That's the big fear porn. Well, if the United States, let's say, for example, if we had a run on the banks here, well, what would that happen? We know what would happen. We've already seen what happens when there's a run on the banks here in the United States. So I'm kind of curious, if we had a run on the banks in France, do you think it would still affect us in the same way it would affect France if our economy were to tank because we had a run on our banks? Do you think it would play out the same way, or do you think we would maintain some immunity against it?
Well, the real open question is going to be how many derivatives, credit default swaps on the French banks are currently held by American investment institutions. Because if they're holding a lot of these credit default swaps and those French banks go down, then yes, it's going to have a significant effect here in the United States of America. So it's kind of hard to guess because we don't know what that derivatives exposure really is between France and the United States. We do know there is some. We know that back in 2008, when the mortgage-backed security fraud collapsed, it caused a lot of damage to the banks in Europe, to the point where there appears to have been a covert bailout of Europe's banks by the U.S. Treasury.
Okay, so you think it's just going to be basically more or less just kind of left open depending on the circumstances?
I think there's going to be some effect here in the United States. How bad it's going to be, I'm not in a position to say.
Okay. All right, man. You have a good one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And getting on back to the news here. President Trump is basically ordering the Federal Emergency Management Agency to stop sending money to California for wildfire management until they get their act together. And in this case, he's absolutely right. California got a large amount of money to keep the forests managed, but Governor Moonbeam said, oh no, we're going to let them grow naturally. We're going to let nature take over. We're not going to go on in and deface these forests by, bulldozing fire trails. And of course, that's why that fire got so completely out of control. Now, Nancy Pelosi, of course, is slamming Donald Trump, basically saying that it's an insult to those who died in the fire. No, actually, what is an insult to those who died in the fire are those government officials who did mismanage the forests and public lands of California and basically set up a situation where a massive fire like that was inevitable. You can't just let the forests grow wild and expect that they're never going to have wildfires. It doesn't work that way. You do have to manage those lands. And one of the misconceptions a lot of people have about the Native Americans is that they just lived with nature and nature did what it was going to do and the Native Americans lived there. And it's actually not true. Archaeologists now understand that the Native Americans actually did quite a bit of land management, that they engineered the open meadows to make hunting easier, that they actually managed the forests to try and make them more productive. So land management is something that is supposed to be part of man's interaction with nature anyway. And again, there was that wonderful speech that Michael Crichton used to do called Chaos Theory in Yellowstone. and he included it as a subsection of his book, State of Fear, where he basically said, look at all the environmental disasters that happened to Yellowstone Park, but there's no evil corporations to blame for it. Every time something bad happened, it was done by these so-called environmental experts with the best of intentions because they just did not understand what they were doing. And again, the book is State of Fear. You can probably find it at the used bookstore. It is a book that Al Gore and the global warming people would like to go away. In fact, Crichton, shortly before his death, he was getting harassed and threatened over that book. Anyway, we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, Rod Rosenstein, over at the Justice Department, who supposedly was overseeing the inquiry into the alleged and never proven Russian meddling in 2016, is now planning to resign. He's going to step down as soon as Trump's nominee for Attorney General, William Barr, is confirmed. And at that point, Rod Rosenstein will step away. And maybe Rod is thinking it's time to basically get while the getting is good, because Barr may actually do the job. I'm being hopelessly optimistic. I'm looking back at the last 6 or 7 attorney generals who all seem part of this cover-up deep state situation. Now, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and by the way, as you're probably aware right now, there is a movie coming out about her and her fight for sexual equality, early feminism, and she did a lot of really good work back then. So it's great that she's getting her little nod that way. She is not doing well, and she has missed her 3rd consecutive day at the Supreme Court. And this is significant because Ruth Bader Ginsburg never missed a single day of oral arguments in all of the years that she has been on that Supreme Court. And so for her to miss 3 in a row, that is serious. Now, she's currently recovering from recent surgery to remove cancerous nodules from her lungs. This is her 3rd bout with cancer. And so with all due sensitivity and respect, apparently quiet preparations are already underway within conservative legal circles and the White House counsel's office in the event that Ruth Bader Ginsburg decides to step down from the bench, or worse. Now, she's 85 years old, and I can understand once you're on the Supreme Court not wanting to step down, but I think there comes a time when anybody's going to look at their own job performance and say, I'm really not up to doing this any longer. So it looks like Trump is probably going to get an opportunity to choose yet another Supreme Court justice, and the American people will be treated to another 3-ring circus courtesy of the liberals during the confirmation hearings. Oh, that nominee, he abused a kangaroo 6 years ago, and that kangaroo had to have therapy, and he's been traumatized, and whatever else they're going to come up with here. Jerome Corsi is moving forward with his major lawsuit against Robert Mueller. Corsi, as you know, was offered a plea bargain which involved basically lying about Donald Trump so that Mueller could go after Trump. And Corsi turned him down and said, no, I'm not accepting any deal that involves my having to lie. And so Corsi is now suing Robert Mueller, I think it's for $350 million, alleging prosecutorial misconduct, bullying, and so forth. It's going to court, and Corsi is saying he's willing to take it all the way to the Supreme Court, and I hope he does. Okay, we have a caller on the line, Matt in Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. I believe that this government shutdown is just organized theater to be a cover story for the economic collapse that they've orchestrated over decades, and that the cutting off of food stamp money aid in February and the lack of the IRS returning people's money to them is going to stop huge amounts of money from entering the economy from the bottom up. and they're going to use that as the cover story for why everything's collapsing, when in fact it's all been planned and orchestrated for decades.
Well, I have absolutely no doubt that they're going to use the shutdown as an excuse for why the economy is falling apart. But the economic crash is not planned and orchestrated. Their problem is they can't keep it from happening any longer. This economy has been in trouble. Well, to be really accurate, the economy was doomed 100 plus years ago with the creation of the Federal Reserve, and it's been ticking along and ticking along. And over the last 30 years, especially with the decline in manufacturing, the economy has been getting worse, and they've tried to salvage it with things like the service economy, and again, siphoning wealth from the rest of the world through Bretton Woods and the petrodollar, but it's a Ponzi scheme. All private central banks are pyramid operations, and all pyramids eventually collapse, and they can't stop it from happening. But you are right in one thing. They're looking for somebody or something to blame so that the American people don't turn on the bankers and their enablers and say, you guys set this up, knowing it was going to crash eventually. You guys set this up, and you had the opportunity to fix this on numerous occasions, and you failed to do so, because Congress can rescind the charter for the Federal Reserve anytime they want to. It's not permanent, locked in stone. And so when it all comes apart, congressmen are going to say, well, the Federal Reserve was created before I was born. And we're going to come back and say, yeah, but you could have shut it down and stopped this crash from happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you on that point. But the biggest thing I want people to remember as things start to really unravel and fall apart is that, Trump using this wall as an excuse to, keep America safe. When you look at the economic harm and all the turmoil and strife that is caused by the shutdown is going to cause far more insecurity and turmoil in America than not having a border wall.
Well, yeah, and that's why the Democrats really would be, if they were really concerned about the American people and about these people in the government who are not working right now, they would go ahead and fund the border wall. I mean, if they can fund Israel's wall against Palestine, if they can fund a wall for Jordan, okay, why can't they go ahead and fund the border wall for Donald Trump? Because in the long run, they'll save money, because the illegal immigrants are costing the United States more than the wall will, just in terms of providing free medical care for all the illegal immigrant births that are taking place. The illegal immigrants, they get into this country, and as quick as they can, they start popping out babies to become, anchor baby citizens, which is why there's a big debate over birthright citizenship. But this isn't Trump's fault. Trump made it very clear he wanted this wall funding. It's the Democrats who are out there saying, we want open borders. We want illegal immigrants to flood into this country. We want diseases to come on in, make you all sick so that the medical industrial complex is going to make money. We want the illegal immigrants here because they will vote Democratic and we can hold on to power. They're already looking towards 2020, and they think if they can get enough illegal immigrants into this country that they can take the Senate and the White House. Unfortunately, I'm predicting they're going to take the White House, because Trump just is a disappointment at this point. So we have to work to keep the Senate Republican. But again, nobody planned or engineered this coming economic crash. The problem is they can't keep it from happening.
Right. Well, I appreciate your time. Have a great show.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Hey, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. The IMF is located in Brussels along with NATO, right?
I think it's headquartered there, yes.
The World Bank's in Washington, D.C., right?
Yes.
Well, do you know the head of the World Bank is stepping down 3 years ahead of time? February 1st. He's getting out of Dodge.
Ooh, yeah. That's a very telling message right there.
Yeah. So, it could be a coincidence. There might not be. I know we're not in part of that clique to know these things, But Mike, I don't know if you know this. Did you hear about Iran is holding a U.S. Navy veteran? I guess he was maybe spying also.
Yeah, he got arrested a while back, and they accused him of espionage.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a tit for tat going on all around the world. You know, I mean,
yeah, there really is, but I think they're trying to make a big issue about this sailor as part of the overall campaign to demonize Iran. Oh, Iran is holding this sailor, and they should send him home and everything. But if he was committing espionage, I mean, anybody who works in intelligence as a field agent, I hope understands the risks. You go into somebody else's country and you conduct espionage, they're going to be very angry about it if they catch you. I mean, during wartime, you're subject to summary execution.
Yeah, remember when the United States went into, I mean, this is how bad this country's become. Our government went into the Russian embassy. Remember that? I mean, no, I mean, that's their ground. You know,
Yes.
that's soil. And, you know, just to walk, that's how much they think of other countries like sovereignty, you know, except our own because we're exceptional, you know, and Israel, you know, but everybody else has no sovereignty. You know, and that's the neocon and the neoliberal mentality.
Yes, it is, unfortunately.
Yeah. And then, Mike, real quick, I just want to let you know, Russia on a remote part of the Arctic coast is doing some training because that's where the next battle is, in the Arctic for natural resources, obviously. But that's all I want to say, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to switch to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I enjoyed the Kavanaugh hearings, and I was hoping they'd go on longer. And I feel the same way with this whole wall government shutdown. I think it really works to Trump's favor the longer the government's shut, and the longer if he folds, he's finished. It'll
Yes.
be like no new taxes with Bush.
Yes.
But what's really going to be interesting here, the real politics of it, is the Democrats fighting the Democrats. Because I watched Steny Hoyer there at that meeting, and he's very uncomfortable. You know why? Because he's a government worker Democrat. He's not a anti-Trump fanatic. They want the government back open. You could see it in his eyes that, well, what's you're going to shut down all these Democrats getting their paychecks for $5.7 billion? That's peanuts.
Yes.
This guy, Steny Hoyer, is a long-time deal maker. You could tell it's bothering him. But no, the Democrats are destroying or hurting their own major element, because they are the party of the government worker, for these fanatic liberals.
Well, it's not the whole Democratic Party. Let's be clear here. I mean, the Republicans are united behind Trump to get that wall built. But in the Democratic Party, there's a lot of dissension. And there are quite a few Democratic members of Congress who are right now saying, no, this is not a good thing. But it is Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer who are driving this forward. It's basically a chest-thumping contest. It's a power play. And they don't care about the harm they are causing to the nation or even to their own Democratic workers or anything else. It's not about the borders. It's not about immigration. It's about basically damaging Trump politically by making him back down.
But that's my point. If Trump holds his guns, you're going to see guys like Steny Hoyer and Joe Manchin. They're going to go to Pelosi and Schumer and say, I've got all these workers. They're not getting paid. They're Democrats going back to FDR, the TVA. And you're going to shut down for $5.7 billion just because you don't like Trump. So Trump's got the winning hand. All he's got to do is stay with it, just like Kavanaugh. He should have let it go another week, because he had the winning hand, and I think he's gonna. I think he's playing a game. I think this is exactly. I hope that he thinks, because the other thing that can really come out of this, besides a wall, is to do away with the government shutdown threat once and for all. That'll be a very valuable thing for the President Trump to have done if he can stand by his guns and say, "Hey, see, I can shut the government down, and so what?" Let them all whine on CNN. Let them all whine. Most people, it has no effect on. If anything, so many of those guys are overpaid. They get too big pension funds, and they're just all they do is write rules and regulations to bust your balls.
Yeah, a lot of people, they look at federal government workers who are paid anywhere between 1.25 to 1.5 times what people in the private sector are paid for the exact same work. And you're right, they have got amazing benefits. They've got union protection. It's almost impossible to fire them. And there's a lot of hostility against them. In fact, I'm looking at this article that just came out of Reason magazine saying, please, TSA workers, don't come back. And so it's going to be hard for Pelosi and Schumer to get the public on their side by trying to build sympathy for the out-of-work federal workers. Now, obviously, some groups like the park rangers and everything, people are going to be feeling bad about them. But Pelosi and Schumer are basically counting on the corporate media to keep portraying this as Trump's shutdown, Trump's shutdown. And so we, the American people, we, the independent media, all of you Rivero's Rangers out there, need to make a point of saying this is all the fault of the it's all the fault of Schumer and Pelosi, who are just out there trying to score political points at the expense of all of these federal government workers. And again, remind them, they're screaming about they don't want a wall on the border with Mexico to deal with the illegal immigrants and the drugs and the gang members coming up. But they were perfectly okay funding a border wall for Jordan. They were perfectly okay funding a wall for Israel. And right now today, there are 4 times as many border walls on between countries on Earth as there were on the day when the Berlin Wall came down. So walls are seen as a good thing, and you need to, yeah.
Well, where I sit, the way I see it, one of two things is going to happen. Trump's going to hold it to his guns, and the Democrats are going to cave, or Trump's going to give to the Democrats and reopen government and declare a national emergency and win anyway. So he's sitting on a winning hand. Personally, I hope he holds to the guns of keeping the government shut down, because I want to show the world I want him to show the world that not to be scared of shutting the government down and when necessary. And that'll take this whole government shutdown wand away from these people. It was stupid when Gingrich surrendered back in '95. I never forgave him for that. When he had the government shut down, he surrendered because a bunch of slave rides were shut down in Yellowstone. Oh my God! And the media was cacophonizing what a demon and the Grinch that he was. And he just folded like a cheap suit. I think Donald Trump is made of sterner stuff than Gingrich, and I hope he stands by his guns.
He has to stand by his guns. If Trump caves on this, that's the end of any chance he has in 2020. He's disappointed his base so many other ways. He's got to win this one, and he's got to start working his way back toward, giving back to his base the support that they gave him in 2016. Because right now, the people who supported him, absolutely. We got to take a break for commercials. Anyway, Joe, thanks an awful lot. Got to take a break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, we're going to go back to the phones to Miles in Maine. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. It's nice to hear you.
Thank you.
Michael, you're welcome. I was just, thinking, and I can't help but get this thought ever so often, and how everyone forgets. Whoever, we're talking humanitarian and this stuff about these illegal aliens, but whoever remembers illegal alien Gonzalez floating into Miami from Cuba?
I remember him. I remember the big stink about, sending him back. That was a real awkward situation. And I think it illustrates why we need a clear set of rules and guidelines about immigration. And there are no exceptions and no loopholes. That's where a lot of this stuff comes from, all these loopholes. And I'm finding myself siding with those who are saying that there has to be a way to say that, no, you non-citizens can't sneak into this country, have a baby, and that baby becomes a citizen. I do think that if 2 people come from another country and they are legal immigrants into this country and they have a baby, that baby is a U.S. citizen. I'm okay with that. But that loophole of just popping out a baby as soon as you get here, that's why they call them anchor babies. Once you've got an anchor baby, that anchor baby is a U.S. citizen. You can't be deported. That's why we have 25 million illegal immigrants in this country right now. 25 million. Just think about what would happen if all those illegal immigrants at once decided to get up and start behaving like, the people down in Zimbabwe or South Africa and say, we're going to start killing the American people and taking their farmlands and properties. 25 million. That is a major, major force. It's certainly bigger than the U.S. Army.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about the alien Gonzalez situation is the mother had sent him over on a raft. The father wanted him home. And, this was during the Clinton administration.
I remember.
And yeah, well, a few of us still do. But, Trump could have brought up, he should be bringing these things up. He should be bringing up this kind of history, and his advisors should be notifying him of it, because it would be valuable right now, right in this situation, with them making such a fuss about these kids that, come here and are basically being used by their parents at any expense to try and get into the country. And, the Democrats...
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
to me, it's child abuse. It's child endangerment. We shouldn't be making these people citizens. We should be throwing them in jail for child endangerment.
And like Rahm Emanuel said, let no good crisis go to waste. Well, I agree. We shouldn't let this crisis go to waste. It should be every day. We should be talking about the case law of the Gonzalez case when he came into Florida. But thank you so much, Mike, and love your show. You know that. Keep up the great work.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to let you go. We're coming up here on station identification. We've got another caller waiting on the line and a bunch of news after that, so should be hearing the music here any second. There it is. Okay. All right, so we're going to do a break for station identification. We've got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. We're going to go right back to the phones to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. Just one of the few people out there that, well, there's a few that speak truth to power. And to me, I think it's just, I think somebody mentioned on the Ron Paul Liberty show today that, they got a control file, or they think they have a control file on Trump. And it makes so much sense. This total reversal in Syria, where we're withdrawing our troops. Oh, we're going to back it down with this, change of pace with Bolton.
Yes,
which we know is a total war hawk. My thinking is that Rothschild Zionists, not the Jewish people, the Rothschild Zionists have a control file on Donald Trump, and that's why they got Jared in there. He's a Chabad Lubavitch, member, and those people are Zionist fanatic, end of time, apocalypse, Zionists. I mean,
well, I don't think it's just the Zionists here. I mean, it's common sense that above a certain level of power and influence, people are going to be collecting files on you in order to try and at least have information politely called opposition research. If they can find something you can be blackmailed with, that's all the better. And one of the reasons I'm concerned about Israel taking all of our freshman congressmen on these, education trips to Israel is, what if they get them over there and get them drunk and get them into bed with a goat or something and get them on video, and from then on for the rest of their career in Congress, they're blackmailable by Israel. I mean, this kind of stuff does go on, and not just Israel. Blackmail is setting people up for blackmail is part of international statecraft, and that's why you've got to be very, very careful when you go on out to places like that. So I imagine that we know the FBI keeps files on Americans of exceptional influence. I'm sure they probably have one on me. It's probably very boring reading. But yeah, we know that Hillary Clinton was researching Donald Trump, before the 2016 campaign, and I'm sure that she wasn't the only one.
I think obviously Trump was out there. I voted for him. I feel a little let down, like you do. But I think definitely, he was a wild child. He's a good guy in a lot of ways. but I think he was obviously a womanizer, but I think, who, the average American doesn't even know who Chabad Lubavitch is, what it is. It's a Zionist death cult that Jared Kushner is a member of. And they believe, when the Mashiach comes, we're all going to be their slaves. They're going to have 2,800 goyams as their slave, which includes me and you.
Yep.
That's not true. This is the guy that...
Well, I'm a terrible slave.
Yeah, I mean, Chabad Lubavitch, I'm sure you know all about it, right, Mike?
Yeah, I've heard about it. Anyway, Mo, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are loading up. We're going to switch to Jim in Michigan. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, I tried to mention this the other day to you, and you were really backed up. But I want to mention climate change. Lord Monckton, England, a mathematician. But what he came up with here lately, and I was a victim of not really knowing a lot about the science, and my daughter's boyfriend is in physics, okay? And he says the science is irrefutable. What Lord Monckton did in his new video that you can get on YouTube is proof that the calculations that they're using are totally wrong. Mm-hmm. And he totally proved that climate change is false. It's totally.
Yes.
Second thing, Mike, is that I'm looking at, the president, and, he met Nancy Pelosi and Chucky Schumer. And what I'm trying to think about is when the president does, like, his Oval Office thing last night, why don't they use the information they have, like Chuck Schumer, talking about we need better global security? It was years ago he did it, but actually show him on camera. I mean, his video, and Pelosi too, and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton all going, we need controls in our border. We need to fund a wall. We need to do. I mean, why doesn't he do that?
He did it on Twitter. Trump put out on Twitter, he put out this really well-made video showing the chaos down at the border, and right smack dab in the middle of it is Chuck Schumer out there saying we need better border security.
But why doesn't he do it when he has the advantage of the whole American people, left, right, center, whatever? If he does it from the Oval Office, just go, well, here's Chuck Schumer. Here's Nancy Pelosi. Here's Bill Clinton. Here's Hillary.
He may have been concerned about the issue of decorum, that being the Oval Office. But I think in theory, you've actually got a good idea. That Trump really needs, instead of just sitting there and talking to us and then have the corporate media rip it apart, be in a position to actually have irrefutable documentation out there, like the video of Schumer saying we need better border security. How would the corporate media respond to that? Well, I know that Don over at CNN would say, well, this is why we have to put the president on tape delay so we can cut out this obvious propaganda that he's using.
Yeah, this is not a video of Chuck Schumer, but yeah, I'm just thinking the president has all this access to everything, and to actually show how just incredibly horrible these people are, just showing their own words. It's like, well, don't look at me, look at what he said.
Yeah.
And go through the whole long list. And that would just show to, and everybody's going to watch him, the haters, the lovers, whomever, the doubters, what have you. But if he does something like that, there's going to be no question in anybody's mind that what he's saying is right, and that the people who are against him because it's Trump, not because they're looking after the security of this country. So anyway, just my idea. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot there. Before you go, though, on the issue of climate change, it sounds like I think you said it was your daughter's boyfriend who's the physicist?
Yes.
Okay. Unfortunately, these days, science education is basically consisting of reading what happened before, memorizing it, and regurgitating it. And the idea of challenging first principles of scientific method, that really has gone away. And what passes for science today is little more than scholarship and repetition. And that, of course, is how we got into trouble with epicycles all those hundreds of years ago. The reality is that a lot of science journals are bought and paid for fakes, especially in the medical area. We know that the promoters of human-caused global warming spent a huge amount of money pushing that idea, including the creation of bogus science journals, and in order to get their agenda of Al Gore wanted to sell carbon credits. Margaret Thatcher wanted global socialism. The globalists wanted a one world government, so forth and so on. And your daughter's boyfriend, in my opinion, having come from a science background myself, he's a very poor scientist because he doesn't ask questions. And he forgets that a scientist's first responsibility to science is to always challenge and question what has come before. Otherwise, we'd still be thinking that the Earth was the center of the solar system.
Well, that's the thing, though, that when I had this discussion, it really got a little bit heated, even though it was in really good taste. But, he said the science is done. There's no discussion. And then I had mentioned, I sent him a link to Lord Monckton's science, okay? And Lord Monckton had these incredible mathematicians, physicists, climatologists that he had on his crew, and they just prove how phony and how false the equation they used to come up with their ideas that the Earth is warming, and they were totally wrong. And
yes.
We're
seeing that now. I mean, Europe is getting slammed, and it's starting to hit the North American continent. It is going to be the very hard winter that the Old Farmer's Almanac said it was going to be. And I'm sure we're going to start hearing the corporate media out there saying, well, global warming is what causes colder winters, which, talk about Orwellian.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
All right, Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to James in Japan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Is this for me, James in Japan?
Yes, James in Japan. You are on the air.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm fine.
That's great. Hey, listen, I got 2 kids going to Hawaii. So I want the first kid to buy you and Claire lunch, and I want the second kid in May, an action star with all this Hollywood stuff around him, to take you to a Hollywood party and get you some lobster tails and stuff like that. That's all I wanted to talk to you about.
Well, I do appreciate that, and Claire and I tend to stay home a lot because she's still recovering from her back injury. But when we get closer to your children coming here, let us get in touch and see if we can work something out that's like really close to where we live, okay? And I do appreciate the offer.
Hey, Mike, just the final thing. Like my son Shane is up there and on the 14th, and I told him get him a great ribs or lobster or whatever, and I'm going to give him your number.
Well, you can give him my number, but if you're talking about the 14th of this month, that is definitely not going to work because, unfortunately, and I haven't even told John Stadmiller this, I have been summoned for jury duty on the 15th. And what I'm going to do is go on in there with my little citizen's rule book, and be reading about jury nullification, and hopefully they'll kick me out of there that same day. But so I would say not likely to happen, but please I extend my thanks, okay? So we're going to let you go. Thank you very much. And the phone lines are now open. Okay, we have been talking about this propaganda operation that was led by a former Obama official. And back during the 2017 Alabama special election, they pulled off 2 frauds against Roy Moore. One was a Facebook campaign to make it look like he was supported by Russia. And the other one was to make it look like Roy Moore, if he was elected, was going to bring back prohibition and turn Alabama into a dry state. Now, to how effective those campaigns were, nobody really knows. We can't find out. But apparently, this organization continued into this year's midterms. or rather last year's midterms. And apparently they bought ads on misleading Facebook pages to try and suppress GOP turnout in the midterm elections. And the Facebook pages were designed to give the impression they were operated by disgruntled conservatives rather than Democratic operatives, saying, stay home or vote Democratic. Really, we're just fed up with the Republican Party is nonsense. It was another false flag effort. It was all funded by left-wing billionaire Reid Hoffman. This is Donald Segretti stuff. You know, dirty tricks. And I don't agree that the First Amendment should cover things like this. The First Amendment is out there to protect the truth, not to protect lies and liars. Okay, Democrats are already out there trying to pass an amendment to abolish the Electoral College. Well, they can pass a bill to abolish the Electoral College. Then it has to go to the Senate. I don't think it'll pass there. Then it has to be sent to the president for signature. Trump is not going to sign this after 2016. And in any event, they will never, ever, ever get 3/4 of the states to ratify it. So whoever put this bill together apparently is actually ignorant of the way the Constitution is supposed to be altered. Or they're going to get on out there and start rioting and saying, get rid of the Electoral College so we only have to campaign in New York and Texas and Pennsylvania and California in order to control the rest of you states. Turning to the war zones, of which there are sadly way too many, Dr. Hussein Baki, the chair of the International Relations Department at Ankara's Middle East Technical University, is out there saying that in his opinion, the U.S. will not withdraw from Syria or the Middle East at all. It's going to become a permanent garrison, just like those other 700 military bases around the world, which is why the Pentagon budget is so gigantic in order to maintain those garrisons all over the American empire. Let's see. The Secretary of Iran's Security Council is saying that right now the United States has reached the point where they have no choice except to change its strategy in Afghanistan. It's been 17 years. The United States has been in Afghanistan longer than World War I and World War II put together, and they are losing. They are being pushed back. So is the Afghan puppet government, the installed junta. Just like they're losing in Syria. Now, speaking of Syria, the military has approved this idea of a conditions-based Syria withdrawal plan. And they're now basically saying, Commander Sean Robertson came on out and said, Operation Inherent Resolve has an approved framework for the withdrawal of forces from Syria and is now engaged in executing that withdrawal. In other words, they're waiting for certain conditions to be met, which will never be met. And he's saying there's no timeline. Will not subject troop withdrawal to an arbitrary timeline. The framework will be influenced by a number of factors, including weather. They're calling it a non-withdrawal withdrawal. So again, for all you soldiers serving in Syria who thought you were coming home for spring, sorry, you're not. Turkey is asking the U.S. to hand over all their military bases in Syria, about 16 of them in northern Syria, which were set up for the fight against ISIS. And this apparently was in the context of Trump's announcement of a withdrawal from Syria, and Turkey figured they'd go on in and say, we'll just take over those bases. But I can imagine, since that is not actually happening, that the United States is going to tell Erdogan to basically go get stuffed. Meanwhile, Turkey is determined to eliminate the terror corridor or northern Syria and makes no distinction between the terrorist groups. This is from President Erdogan as of yesterday, saying that Turkey is prepared for a new military incursion into Syria to eradicate ISIL, ISIS, Daesh, whatever they're calling themselves this week. So there's going to be an incursion by Turkey into Syria, and I can't imagine that Syria is going to be all that happy about it. Supposedly, the Kurds were allied to the United States. So the big question is going to be, is the United States in Syria going to go up against Turkey in Syria to protect the Kurdish militants? And if so, how will Syria's government respond to that? Or will the U.S. simply abandon the Kurds? And the big problem is we can't really know what's going on until it happens, because Trump can say we're going to leave the Kurds to their fate, and then the next day Bolton and Pompeo can say, oh, no, we're sending the troops on in. We have to protect our allies up there. A major Turkish daily newspaper is looking at the recent switchback, flip-flop on Syria, and it is their opinion that right now Donald Trump is the victim of a soft coup. In other words, he's still sitting in that Oval Office, but all of his power and authority has been usurped by other individuals and segments of the government. And that could well be. A soft coup has certain advantages. The American people, for the most part, aren't aware that it's happened. So there's less likely to be rioting in the streets. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors, so stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And over in Yemen, there may be a little break, a little light breaking through the clouds. Apparently, a high-ranking Yemeni official is saying delegates from the Houthi Ansarullah movement have agreed to sit at the negotiating table with representatives loyal to former Yemeni President Abd Rabbu Mansur Hadi during the latest round of UN-sponsored peace negotiations in Sweden. And they struck a peace deal only because of the deteriorating humanitarian condition in Yemen. And basically, speaking on Press TV, Mohammed Ali al-Houthi, the chairman of the Supreme Revolutionary Committee of Yemen, said despite some violations by Saudi Arabia and its allies, the peace deal continues to stand feebly. He, however, underlined that Yemeni army forces and allied fighters from popular committees are fully prepared to respond to any act of aggression committed by Saudi Arabia. So, with any luck, that is now calming down. Over in Palestine, it's rather interesting to see that Mahmoud Abbas is clearly becoming more and more pro-Israel vis-a-vis the treatment of Gaza. And they are really tightening the screws on Gaza. And apparently the Palestinian Authority has withdrawn its personnel from the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt overnight. That is the only portal in and out of Gaza with the rest of the world. And Hamas authorities have resumed control over the Gaza side of the crossing, but it's unclear whether Egypt will open their side of the gate. Meanwhile, U.S. aid has shut down all their operations in Palestine, and of course, local organizations are going to suffer the most. And I think what is going on here, we know that Donald Trump's deal of the century, and he wants to get that ramrodded through, it is a total giveaway to Israel, including this ridiculous demand that the other nations in the Middle East compensate Israel $250 billion for lands that Israel supposedly lost, or that Jews supposedly lost during the creation of Israel. Another condition in there is Palestinians surrender their right of return, which was guaranteed to them by the United Nations. And I think what's going on here is a campaign of starvation. They are going to simply starve the Palestinians to the point where they'll say, yes, we'll sign the deal of the century, please send in the food. And I'm not the only one who thinks so. Over at Middle East Monitor, they've got an article saying something really bad is being prepared for the Palestinians in Gaza. A senior member of the Hamas Political Bureau has said the worst is still to come as soon as the Gaza Strip is concerned. Musa Abu Marzouk's remarks followed the announcement by the Palestinian Authority of the Rafah border closing. And he tweeted similar sentiments after the Palestinian Authority Minister of Civil Affairs, Hussein al-Sheikh, pledged that more punitive measures to tighten the siege on the Palestinians in Gaza are on the way. Now, the Palestinian Authority, it wasn't all that long ago when the Palestinian Authority and Hamas were talking about getting together and unifying to have just one Palestine, Gaza and the West Bank. And somehow or other, somebody managed to throw a monkey wrench in there, and now Abbas over at the PA is now saying Hamas has got to go. There's going to be one ruler over Gaza, and that will be the Palestinian Authority. Well, I think the Gazans are not going to really be happy with that, considering how you're treating them right now. Meanwhile, do you remember a while back there in November, there was a botched IDF covert mission in Gaza, where they drove into Gaza disguised as Hamas. They got busted and caught, and it was a big stink. Didn't make the American corporate media. So far, Hamas has arrested 45 Israeli spies and collaborators in Gaza that are linked to that botched raid. So if you're wondering who it is who conveniently fires a rocket into the dirt of Israel every time Israel wants to attack Gaza, now you know. They have spies and infiltrators. So apparently the arrested Israeli agents had been recruited by Israel over the phone and social media, often through the use of blackmail. So the Israelis continue to recruit Palestinian agents to help them commit crimes against the Palestinian people. And Hamas has actually issued an appeal. Those who are being coerced or blackmailed by the IDF to turn themselves in. Meanwhile, the IDF is warning their forces to be on the lookout for infiltration and recruitment by the Central Intelligence Agency. Ooh, everybody's spies are having fun. They're going back and forth here. Finally, Netanyahu is slipping in the polls toward the upcoming elections. And former Israeli Army Chief Benny Gantz is closing the gap. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. So we're talking about politics in Israel, and Israel is having snap elections coming on up. And apparently, Netanyahu is losing ground in the polls to former Israeli Army Chief Benny Gantz. And I imagine Netanyahu's getting very nervous because right now from his political office, so far he's been able to hold off those indictments for corruption. But if he loses this next election, he's an ordinary citizen. Interestingly enough, the head of Shin Bet Security Services is now out there warning that a foreign country intends to intervene in Israel's national elections in April through cyber attacks. So it looks like Netanyahu is getting ready to pull a Hillary, blame outside interference when he loses. Okay, now this is an interesting development. This is coming out of 21st Century News Wire, and it concerns the Skripals. And we have been talking about this situation about where are they? Following the supposed Novichok attack on them, they have not been seen except for one very obviously staged and controlled photo op with Yulia. And everybody's saying, are they still alive? Are they still dead? According to this article in 21st Century, they're actually living in an MI5 safe house, but more importantly, they are working for British security services. Maybe they were all along. Just something to think about. And that would certainly be a reason for the government of Great Britain to refuse Russia's request to allow diplomatic visits to the Skripals. The Skripals are still Russian citizens. And under international law, Russia has a right to visit with them and make sure that they're okay. Apparently, attacks on Somalia's al-Shabaab have increased under Donald Trump. So that's escalating. And in case you're wondering, Somalia is over there in Africa. So we're, again, wars all over the place here. Now, John Bolton is saying terrorists operating in Africa have repeatedly targeted U.S. citizens and interests. Well, you need to step back and say, what were those interests doing? Because we know that the United States has a long history of going into other countries and commandeering their resources for pennies on the dollar and impoverishing the people. They did it to Cuba. That's what led to the Castro Revolution. They made a deal with Batista to buy Cuba's agricultural produce at way below market prices, which made companies like United Fruit and the PepsiCo very, very wealthy. And it made the Cuban people very, very poor. And that's what led to the Castro Revolution. Seen the same thing all over South America. Now, over in Iran, their foreign minister, Zarif, is out there saying that the U.S. is acting like they're obsessed with Iran, that it really has become an obsession, and that Pompeo and Bolton are acting like failing psychotic stalkers. And I don't think he's off base with that. I really, really don't. Because, yeah, it does seem like our government is obsessed with Iran all the time. The European Union has decided to sanction Iran, specifically an Iranian intelligence unit and 2 of its staff, on the basis that Netherlands accused Iran of 2 killings on its soil and joined France and Denmark in alleging Tehran plotting other attacks in Europe. In other words, the EU is sanctioning Iran over things that the EU-Iran might do in the future. It's sort of minority report on a nation-state scale. As a result, Iran has given up on trying to do business with Iran, and they're turning back to their traditional partners, China, Russia, and India. And they already have mechanisms in place to be able to circumvent the U.S. sanctions. They're trading in their own currencies. They're not going through the dollar. They're not going through SWIFT. The fact of the matter is the sanctions are losing power. Russia's economy is continuing to grow. The sanctions are not having an effect because Russia is doing business with that part of the globe. The sanctions are causing more harm to Russia's former trading partners in Europe and in the United States of America. According to a World Bank report, inflation in Russia remained low while the expansion of the economy occurred last year. The Russian economy expanded at a 1.6% pace in the year just ended. Not great, but still, considering all the sanctions, not bad at all. Getting on over to France and the Yellow Vests, things are definitely cranking up on the crank down, if you will. France is moving to ban all unofficial protests. If you're going to have any kind of a protest, you must have government permission first, or there'll be bad things. And it's a major crackdown, primarily on the Yellow Vests, but they're saying all protests to basically not make it look like the government of France is afraid of the Yellow Vests, even though that's exactly what it is. So this new law under consideration would make any demonstration illegal to begin with, if not previously approved by French authorities. And this is an initiative already being compared to the pre-Maidan so-called dictatorship law in Ukraine. So France is going on down the same path that led to the upset in Ukraine. Now, Macron could actually trigger a debt crisis with his crackdown on the Yellow Vest. And he's clearly not understanding the situation. And he's in a political vice. And ignoring the program will make him look weak, cracking down on the people makes him look like a tyrant. He's really in a bit of a corner here. Now, as one of our callers mentioned before, the Yellow Vest protesters are urging French citizens to empty their bank accounts this weekend. And they're calling for massive cash withdrawals from the banks. It's all over social media. And again, what's Macron going to do? Shut down social media? That's not going to go over very well with the French people. Is he going to tell the banks, refuse withdrawals? That could actually trigger an even larger run on the bank. Now, the Yellow Vest movement is taking a big gamble here, because if only a few people take their money out of the bank, it's going to send a message the Yellow Vests don't really have that much support. Now, if there is a huge run on the French banks, that's going to tell the world this movement is alive and well, and it is not going anywhere. And by the way, the Yellow Vest movement has already spread to Australia and Poland. It is all over the world. The Italian government is now supporting the Yellow Vest movement. Okay, we're going to take a phone call from Tom in Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, or hey, Mike, it's Tom. First time caller. Love the show. Just wanted to let you know that I'm one of the people that are affected by the shutdown, actually. So I'm going to, try to stay as, as anonymous as I can. But essentially, there's a lot of people inside the government that actually do support the border security angle of this.
Yes.
And I fear that if we don't get this done now, we're never going to get it done. Because as you can see, from 2006 to 2011, this has just been, sort of on a carousel. And I don't think the government wants to do it. I think it's a systematic process to actually dwindle down the quality of citizen that lives in this, that lives in this country. And I just, I feel really bad that the country can't come together and just say, okay, you want 5, we'll give you 3. You go home happy. We go home happy. Let's reopen the government. Because whenever you take a look at $5 billion, it's a drop in the bucket. And
it really is in terms of government spending. I mean, this is a government that misplaced $21 trillion between the Pentagon and the housing and urban development. They have no idea where it went. So $5.6 billion is nothing to these people. And again, last year they funded a complete border wall for Jordan. They've helped fund the wall in Israel. This is all about scoring points here. And you're absolutely right. If we do not get our border secure, it's never going to happen. Because the Democrats are going to get back into power. They are globalists, and the globalists want all these border walls torn down so that, everybody blends together with everybody else. And too bad if there's epidemics and rapes and robberies and everything. It's a small price to pay for that dream of a one world government and a single gleaming golden throne of planet Earth.
And I'll tell you something else. The whole thing is you've got these the Trump haters, as I like to call them, who said, well, he said that Mexico was going to pay for the wall. And in a sense they did whenever you sign a new trade agreement and your trade deficit isn't as high, I consider that payment. Like, I was not a naive Trump supporter that just thought, the Mexican president's going to cut a check and say, here you go, let's build a wall. And I wasn't even naive to even suspect that it would be a 2,000-mile wall that stretched from Texas to California. But what I was expecting was high concentrated areas to have some form of physical barrier with state-of-the-art technology used in order to detract people or deter people from coming across the border. I don't understand the mental mindset, because I'm a very logical thinker. I don't understand the mindset of somebody who would allow, and it goes back to the officer in California.
Yes.
That man did everything right in his life. He wanted to come to the U.S. He did it. He's raising a family. He's living the American dream. And somebody who did the exact opposite of that took his life. And the people on the left are like, oh, well, it's that's a once in a million thing. Well, if you're that once, that's your whole world. There should never be a once. We should have proper vetting of people coming into this country.
It's just common sense. It's just common sense. Never in the history of the world, of organized nations or kingdoms or whatever, has there ever been the idea of totally open borders. Every ruling body, every ruling council, emperors, kings, potentates, whatever, has had this idea, I get to decide who comes in and lives here and who does not. We want productive people who are coming on in, who are going to be a benefit of our society. We don't want criminals coming on in here. We certainly don't want the lepers coming on in here. And it's just common sense. Only in the 21st century has this idea that borders are bad been promoted. Again, you need to understand, we don't need a fence across 2,000 miles of our southern border because much of that is the Rio Grande River, which is very difficult to get across. And again, I think we ought to throw some crocodiles in there. We're talking about 1,200 miles. And again, I think this is the globalists at work, because back in 2006, they passed a bill to fund 700 miles of border fence, almost half of what is needed. And they only built 30 miles of it. Why? Why did that fail? Where did that money all go? Who was it who went on in and said, well, we don't really need to build this wall, even though that's what the law says? So even all the way back in 2006, we can see the globalists, the open border people, trying to undermine border security.
And I'll tell you something else. Here's the other thing that gets me. I was so sick of being lied to by politicians, like, oh, you can keep your doctor, which, that was a lie.
Yes.
But the bottom line is that whenever somebody who wasn't a politician came to me and said, I'm going to give you something, I really think and believe that Donald Trump on day one thought he was going to be able to do that. And because he wasn't part of the bureaucracy, and he's finding out that DC doesn't want to change.
Yes.
And it's Rome all over again. You're going to have, whenever you're electing somebody that calls your president an MFer, you're going to have, the next thing we're going to do is have a horse elected to the Senate. It's...
Wouldn't be the first time.
It's pandemonium. And I just don't like the fact that, because like I said, I'm on the other side of the fence. I work for an organization, and I won't say which one, but I won't be getting a paycheck on the 15th. And I've told family and friends, I said, heck, they could keep it just as long as the money went to the wall. And my coworkers are like, man, you're nuts. And I'm like, no, I'm not. It's an investment in your future, in your kids' future. It has nothing to do about race. It has nothing to do about gender or politics. It has to do about what is right. And what is right is that there is a process, and even though 21st century new take on it, but there needs to be a process there that will allow people to get across the border in a lawful manner.
Yes.
And I just, it irritates me that the government can't see eye to eye. I always said, Trump could come out and cure cancer, and the Democrats would say, well, he killed at least 1.3 million white blood cells. And they would be up in arms over that.
Yeah, they would be. I mean, that's the Democrats' attitude. There is nothing Trump can do that will be seen as a good thing, and they are working very hard to make sure Trump accomplishes nothing. They're willing to sacrifice our border security, not just to the gods of globalism, but for the sake of the 2020 elections.
Well, I want to just tell you on a final note that I'm actually really happy that I found your show. I found it back during the 2016 election, and then I've been hooked ever since. And like I said, this is my first time calling in. But if I was, my final thought is this. If I was Donald Trump, I would have a weekly press conference from the Oval Office. Because the only thing CNN did was call him a liar after he got done.
Yeah, Tom, I got to let you go. We got to take a commercial break. Thanks and good luck. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Layla in Canada. Layla, welcome back to the show. And what is on your mind today?
Yes. Hi, Mike. This is a follow-up to yesterday. You said I wouldn't be calling back for a while, so I wanted to prove to you that you are wrong. I am calling back today.
Mea culpa maxima.
One of the reasons is that I wanted to correct the name of the village. You said that I referred to. You said it was Der Azor.
Yeah.
Actually, Der Yassin. You said people could look it up for themselves.
Der Yassin. Okay.
Have the correct name, Yassin. But furthermore, the whole story has been whitewashed. The events within the community that I described yesterday were verified by relatives of my father, who were among the men who went to the community to clean up the mess that was left behind. And what I described was exactly what had happened. But furthermore, after I hung up, you said that I should have some decency and common sense. Are you suggesting that I lack decency and have no common sense?
Well, let me put it to you this way. The reason I got upset, like I said, I know for a fact there are children who are listening, and instead of getting into the graphic details, you could have simply chosen to say there were mutilations on the victims. And it seemed to me like, I don't even remember what topic we'd actually started out with, because when you call into the show, we have a tendency to sort of wander off into other areas that were not intended and are away from our central topic. And you've got a tremendous body of knowledge, and a lot of people write on in, they compliment you. And we got a lot of email about what happened yesterday that was split kind of down the middle, where half of them thought I should have just let you go on, and the other half thought that maybe you'd gone across a line with the graphic depictions of what was being done. So we're walking a very fine tightrope here.
Mike, have you ever read the National Sexuality Education Standards Core Content and Skills for grades kindergarten to grade 12?
No, I can't say that I have.
I won't. Well, you should, because it is far more graphic and specific. The two words that I used were common in everyday language. And if people are talking about a revolution or a civil war, they should know what kind of consequences occur when wars become the environment within which they exist.
Okay, well, Layla, it's one thing to have Layla. My turn, Layla. Okay, it's one thing to have anatomically correct words in the context of a medical book or an educational book, and quite another to be using those terms in combination with depictions of knives slicing parts of the body off. And it was at that point that I said, we really need to pull on that.
Your show is called What Really Happened, past tense. You also promote yourself as an advocate of free speech. Yet right now you're censoring me by playing your music, and you're going to blow me off.
Well, look, I don't choose when the music comes on. That's up to the clock. But you're absolutely right. We're going to say goodbye, and we're going to let you go. We'll be back with hour number 3 after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and this is hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're going to go back to the phones. Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I want to expand a little bit on something Dustin said, over an hour ago. He brought out the fact, which is on your website, about the IMF. Although that's going to be retiring a little early. Didn't David Rockefeller tweet something to Donald Trump?
Not that I recall. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but it doesn't ring a bell.
Oh, he told him to shut the up?
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. Yes.
Yes. I mean, right there. Maybe Rockefeller, or not Rockefeller, sorry, David Rothschild.
Yes.
It was Rothschild. Yes. And right there, he showed his hand. So he kind of proved everything that kind of was, people were kind of being called conspiracy theorists and all that jazz about.
Yes.
Whereas, the owners of the Federal Reserve, I mean, they're shareholders of the big banks, but who owns the big banks?
Well,
Right?
the bankers basically rule the world, and that was the whole point of creating private central banking 300 years ago. It was a very clever scheme that basically took control of the people's currency away from the people and away from the civil government and put it in the hands of the bankers. And once they had control of the currency, they called the shots. In fact, it was one of the Rothschilds who said, "Give me control of a nation's currency, and I care not who makes the laws."
There it is. It's right there out in the open. I mean, that tweet said everything as far as I was concerned. But another thing, too, Mike, I've kind of noticed, I've been listening to you for probably a good seven years, like live. And then, of course, I've been on your website for a long, long time. But, a few years ago, you weren't as tolerant as you are now when it comes to people calling in. And, I remember, like, a few people that call in regularly, you even kind of, like, went, whoa, and, you pull the reins back and said, hey, listen, this is my show, not yours. You are doing the public a favor by opening your telephone on air to other people's opinions and their views. It's not a right, it's not a right for you to take anybody's phone call. So, I mean, I wish, your viewers would consider that.
Yeah.
They call in and they inundate you with nonsense or whatever. Or just kind of leaning to one side, which has happened a lot, too. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I know what you're saying here, and part of it is as I've gotten older, I'm getting a little bit more mellow. But Layla challenged me about freedom of speech, and I do support freedom of speech, but there are caveats on it. For reasons having to do with the Federal Communications Commission, I can't let people call into the show and scream profanity and bad words all over the air. I'm not interested in having people call into the show and talk about pornography because that's not what this show is all about. And in the case of Layla, there were ways that she could tell her story that would be a little bit, shall we say, gentler in the manner in which she chose her presentation. I had to say, I think this needs to be reined in because I am aware there are, in fact, children who listen to this program. And they don't need to go to bed and have nightmares over the way that this was being described. So I hope Layla will calm down and come back to the show because a lot of people admire the breadth of her knowledge. But having worked in the media herself, I would presume that she understands that freedom of speech comes with certain responsibilities, which is that you are careful about what you say and how you say it. And that freedom of speech is not just a license to give into verbal frenzy and scream whatever comes to your mind in a stream of consciousness attack.
Yeah, that's the big one right there. And that's the problem with like having a live radio show that
yes.
more than you and I can hear. You guys, you have to be. I think everybody should just pull back a little bit right now because we're getting like so close to a cliff.
Yes.
With everything that's going on, I mean, people just need to pull back and just stop, take a breath, and if there's flowers, smell them. If not, just think about what's going on and how we can stop this from happening again. If there's any hope, I don't know, Mike. Maybe it's like you said. There's going to come a collapse, and it's going to be horrific, and here's what you need to do in order to mitigate a lot of the, ancillary effects, blowback, or whatnot. I appreciate your time, Mike. We love your show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mike in our control room just sent me a message over the text window saying that you don't have to be graphic and gross to express outrage, and I think that's really what it comes down to. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to go to Don in the Philippines. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yesterday you talked about the TSA a little bit, how they're not getting their paychecks or something like that. I mean, I don't know exactly. Basically, you're saying the regular derogatory stuff about the TSA, which they richly deserve any derogatory stuff you can say about them. But I went through not long ago, and I try to have fun with them now. I mean, I opt out all the time now, and but I told there was a young lady there that wasn't bad looking. I said, look, I'm going to opt out, but I want you to be the one to grope me. You know, so she just laughed and she said, no, I pass. But I got to thinking about it. Why not? Why does it have to be a man to grope you? I mean, we have, certainly we have, it's standard practice for women to give massages to men in America.
Yes.
You have the doctors, you have female doctors, female nurses, who grope every aspect of your anatomy. So if this is just supposed to be a totally professional deal where they're just trying to see if you, I guess they're trying to see if you have a bomb in your pants or something like that, right? I guess, or a weapon. Well, I mean, why can't it be a female?
Well, I got an idea. TSA ought to hire up some of those women from the massage parlors up there and then charge the customers a premium to go through getting groped. Think of all the money that they would raise that way. And that would cover the government shutdown. They could go back to work and get their paychecks.
Yeah, I mean, they should make it enjoyable for the customer. I mean, what if I told him I was gay? What if I was gay? What if a gay guy said, "Look, I feel violated by a man groping me. I would have to have a female I could tell him I'm gay, and therefore I have to have a female. I mean, why do they have to be so puritanical? This is the point I'm getting at.
Well, they're trying to basically deal with the fact that they are getting a lot of criticism for invading the personal space of travelers, and I think most people are just very angry over the presumption that we're all being treated like criminals, that we're all being treated like terrorists by an organization that has never once actually found a terrorist, but has never hesitated to help themselves to our property as they go through our luggage. So, as I mentioned before, there was an article that came on out today saying, "Dear TSA, don't come back." And I can understand that feeling about why people feel that way. I would like to. They're useless. They're absolutely useless. They have not found a single terrorist. I mean, I don't have a problem with the bomb and drug sniffing dogs, as long as I get to pet them when it's all over, because I'm a dog lover. Anyway, listen, we're going to let you go. And Don, thank you very much for the phone call. And I've got an email that just came on in that said, I have 2 teenagers that listen to the show, and I agree with your position that the caller should be less graphic and more general about the subject she was discussing. My kids are mature enough for most subjects discussed here, but those graphic details you were giving were way too much for their maturity level, and I had to quietly mute the radio. Okay, so there's more on that. Okay, now getting on back to the international news. As you know, they're getting ready for a second Trump-Kim summit, and apparently one of the locations where they may have it, or they're considering having it, is right here in Hawaii. Oh, gee, Secret Service is going to have the traffic all jammed up again. So apparently Representative Gene Ward is saying that Hawaii ought to be considered as the Geneva of the Pacific, where disputes can be settled, and that is not a new idea. A lot of international conferences do come here. The Asia Pacific Economic Conference was here a few years ago. Actually, it's more than a few. It was back during the Bush administration, and Bush was actually supposed to show up, and because I had to attend, I actually had to get cleared by the Secret Service, which stunned me when they said, yeah, it was okay for me to go on in. Not that I had any malice or anything on my mind, but I figured because of the website and everything, they'd say, oh, heck no, get him out of here. But they may come here to Hawaii, and that would be very interesting to see. Down in Australia, something is going on. Suspicious packages have been found at several diplomatic missions in Melbourne, including the Indian consulate, prompting Australian authorities to launch a major emergency response. 10 international consulates got these packages with a mysterious white powder, which has yet to be identified, and they're treating it as a hazardous material alert and basically trying to figure out what's going on. All right. Now, here's an interesting little story. This is out of Press TV. The Pentagon, our Pentagon, which has lost trillions and trillions of your taxpayer dollars, apparently in last year's budget, they allowed $27.7 billion in funds to expire. Now, what that means is money that was allocated for various programs and it wasn't spent. And for the Pentagon, that's bad news because it justifies those in Congress saying we need to pull back on defense spending. We gave them too much money. And I remember we went through the same thing with NASA. There was always a big push to make sure that we spent all of our allocated money by the end of the fiscal year. Otherwise, we faced budget cuts the next year. It's kind of a weird mechanism, I think, but that's the way it works. But there's $27.7 billion in unspent money sitting in the Pentagon. Now, to fully build the wall that Donald Trump ultimately wants, all the way from the Pacific down to the start of the Rio Grande, is $25 billion. So right there, without Pelosi, without Chuck Schumer, is enough money to build the entire fence, not just this small section of it, with enough money left over to hire forensic accountants to find out where the Pentagon and the Housing and Urban Development Agency lost those $21 trillion. I think it's a great idea. I think we ought to be talking about doing that here. On the other hand, there's a different opinion. Over at the U.S. House of Representatives Armed Services Committee, the top representative, Mac Thornberry, told reporters that he opposes using U.S. defense funds for the border wall. And his exact quote to the reporters was, "I am opposed to using defense dollars for non-defense purposes." Well, Mac, building a wall to keep out invaders is, in my opinion, a defense purpose. And let's be very honest, most of the money the Pentagon spends is not for defense. It is for offense. Now, the Pentagon, this is coming out of Free Beacon, is out there saying that the current military logistics system is not ready for a war with China or Russia. And they had this special task force on survivable logistics evaluating the military's current airlift, sea lift, even pre-positioned equipment, and supplies. And they said that there's problems. There are major problems with supporting forces during a high-end conflict, meaning against somebody who can actually stand up and fight back, unlike all these little tiny countries the U.S. is slapping around all over the place here. So the report said in an unclassified summary, since the end of the Cold War, the United States has not fought an adversary capable of the catastrophic disruption of military supply chains and deployment of personnel and materials. Now, I'm sure what the Pentagon is talking about is they want more money to start building up the fleets of cargo planes and cargo ships and so forth and so on. But it does underscore something I've been saying along. We're not capable of fighting a war against Russia or China and winning, let alone both of them together. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, I have a quick question. That congresswoman who called President Trump Mother Effer.
Yeah.
And, can the Secret Service arrest her?
No. No, I mean, to be as disgusting as what she said is, it's covered by the First Amendment. She was at a party being thrown for her swearing in. It was with a political group, and she expressed a sentiment, and as distasteful as it might be, it's covered by the First Amendment. If she were on my radio show, I would certainly bleep it. Yeah, there's nothing the Secret Service can do until she comes on out and threatens physical bodily harm against the president or the president's family.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Good night.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Getting into the economic news here, the U.S. dollar is plummeting this morning, even though there's been a recent trend, more hawkish views in the Fed rate shift expectations. The Fed has been raising rates, which has slammed the stock market. It has certainly slammed everybody with a variable rate mortgage, variable rates on their credit cards, car loans, and so forth. But there is already talk that come March, the Fed may be forced to lower rates again. So we'll see what's going to happen. This game playing with the rates is all about maximizing the profit the Federal Reserve makes from you, the American people. As long as the rates are low and the economy is chugging along, that's great for you and I. It's not great for the owners of the Federal Reserve. They want their profit. They want those rates to go up to extract more wealth. But if they do it too much, they can cause the economy to basically stutter and shut down, at which point nobody is making any profits anywhere. Over at Fitch, they are threatening to cut the U.S. credit rating because there's another debt ceiling battle coming on up, where we're going to watch Congress and the White House go through this sort of theater presentation of, oh, the debt ceiling must go up. No, we can't let the debt. And in the end, of course, the debt will go up because they don't really have any choice. Now, apparently, at least according to this story in the Daily Crusader, the euro is falling sharply, apparently triggered by fears that the yellow vest call for a French bank run might actually succeed. And apparently, the euro has fallen about 0.25%, which may not sound like much, but it could be the breeze that signals a major storm. But many people in France are disillusioned with their government, which they see as openly selling them to globalist interests. Well, welcome to our world. Okay. As you know, the U.S. government is over in China trying to come to some kind of a trade deal in Beijing. At the same time, they are supporting Taiwan's bid for independence and sending warships and bombers into the South China Sea. They do seem to be working at cross purposes, and to nobody's surprise, the U.S. issued a statement that the today's meeting in Beijing was disappointing. Basically, nothing happened. They've concluded 3 days of trade talks, and the Wall Street Journal is saying the two sides made progress toward an agreement, but leaving the thorniest issues to be resolved in higher level talks. So it doesn't look like anything happened over there. India has started paying for Iranian oil in rupees. So the U.S. sanctions against Iran are having no effect there. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about the economic news. Standard & Poor's has now downgraded Pacific Gas and Electric to junk status. This will probably trigger an $800 million collateral call. In other words, investors in PG&E are now looking at not getting their investment back. They may demand whatever was pledged as collateral on those loans. Now, the reason this is happening is because PG&E is now open to all kinds of lawsuits related to those California wildfires, because it's been established that a high-tension line that had not been properly maintained is what sparked what was called the campfire, I think, that just caused a huge amount of damage. Now, PG&E's got a bad reputation. It's catching up with them. If you remember Aaron Brockovich, it was PG&E that basically had that hexavalent chromium contamination out at Hinckley, California, that made all those people sick. And there was a huge, huge lawsuit, and it made Erin Brockovich famous. They made a movie about her. And now we have PG&E again, because of their very lax procedures, sparked off this fire. There's no question that they sparked it off. They're looking at massive lawsuits, and it looks like PG&E may be in serious trouble. Now, obviously, somebody somewhere is going to have to come in and take it on over in order to continue gas and electric service to their customers. Maybe it should be the state of California. Turn it back into a public utility and get it away from being a privately run for-profit corporation. Privatization has always been a disaster for the customers of any of these utilities. Maybe the PG&E case will be an opportunity to reverse that trend and say this has to go back to being a publicly owned, publicly operated utility. I think that would be a really good thing. Now, Jeff Gundlach, every January, has a Just Markets webcast. And over the last several years, he's been very, very accurate. And so he's come out with his webcast for this year. He's nicknamed the Bond King. And he's saying that this is a completely horrific situation. So yet another expert with a track record is saying it's going to happen this year. It is definitely going to happen this year. Story out of Zero Hedge. Apparently the World Bank is urging, leave the central banks alone. And apparently the World Bank just wrote this politically charged mini Project Fear report aimed at Trump, saying, it's titled Storm Clouds Are Brewing for the Global Economy, which we all know. But their argument is out there is leave the private central banks alone. Really, it's not their fault. Don't do anything about the private central banks. Well, I think when the economy starts coming apart, you're going to start seeing a lot of nations that have nationalist governments, anti-globalist governments. They're going to start saying, yeah, we need to go back to state-owned banking and state-owned currencies. And I think that's what the World Bank is worried about, that too many people are aware of the failings of private central bankings, of the predations of private central banking. And they're going to demand this must stop. No more imposed debt slavery. Down in Venezuela, they're in a downward spiral. They're selling their oil for lower and lower prices just to keep selling it. It's dragging OPEC down as well. So at least there's a little bit of good news that at least in some parts of the world, oil and gas prices are going down. We're not seeing it here in the United States, unfortunately, at least not here in Hawaii. The gas prices are continuing to go up. Over in Sweden, as you know, their hate speech laws have been expanded to those who criticize the open borders and the migration. And apparently hate speech convictions have soared tenfold as a result of this new definition of hate speech. If you criticize the migrants coming on in, oh my goodness, crime has gone through the roof. People are getting raped for all these migrants. Oh, that's hate speech. That's hate speech. No, it isn't. They're reporting on what's going on. But Sweden's ultra liberal government, oh, no, you can't say that. You can't say that. Says, if your daughter gets raped, you just say quiet about it. Or we'll get you for the hate speech here. Over in Great Britain, boy, I'm almost on the verge of feeling sorry for Theresa May. Almost. Apparently she suffered yet another parliamentary defeat as the Brexit debate has restarted. And apparently the Commons passed an amendment that will help kill May's Brexit deal. So it looks like we're going toward if there's not a last-second compromise with the EU, it's going to be a no-deal Brexit. We got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And as you know, there is a grand jury that is being convened to look at the evidence of explosives being used in the destruction of the World Trade Towers. And this is the law. Lawyers have a right to basically demand there be a grand jury. And the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York was forced to basically comply with that federal law. So everybody's getting ready to basically see what's going to happen. And I'm waiting to see just how the government intends to derail this, because obviously the truth about 9/11 getting out to the general public is going to be an embarrassment. Although it's getting on out there, because apparently a study from Chapman University in California has found that more than half of the American people do not believe the official 9/11 story. And this is in part because large sections of the official U.S. government report have been redacted and are still redacted. If what happened was what we're being told happened, there's no reason for such secrecy, really, is there? It's the same thing with the John F. Kennedy assassination. Part of that stuff is still classified. Oh, you can't know that. Just take our word for it. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Michael, good day. Michael, I don't know if you had a chance to see the speech Trump gave today in the White House when he was talking about the border wall with Israel and Benny Netanyahu, and there's 99, and then he told the reporter, no, it could be 95, 99, 91 or whatever it was. But Trump said it could be 99.9% the border will work, the wall that Israel has works. Why don't we have a wall? And then I'm wondering, none of these reporters for the, I don't know what kind of government you call it, the Zionist occupation, I don't know what it is called, Michael, whatever, asked the question, well, how come we don't have a wall like Israel? And then, you know, last night, Schumer and Pelosi together, I'm telling you, you could bet on Saturday night, when they do Saturday night this weekend, they're going to have pitchforks in their hands. They're going to do a skit with them with pitchforks, like the grandpa and grandma with the pitchforks. You know?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they will. I mean, somebody already did this incredible tracked animation where they added a beard and a hat to Schumer and a bonnet to Pelosi. And they were playing the theme from Green Acres behind them while they were talking. But yeah, I mean, you could almost tell from their demeanor that they knew they were losing this one. And there's a bit of a panic out there. Certainly Don Lemon over at CNN, who's out there saying, we've got to block the president because the American people might actually believe him, tells you just how crazy they have become in their Trump derangement syndrome.
Can I ask you? Yeah. Can I ask you, what would happen if one of these Democrats were to have one of their family members, a grandson or grandkid, a daughter or son, murdered by an illegal alien, like Schumer or Pelosi or any of these Democrats? One of their family members were murdered by robbery, or you got the drunk driving. Somebody hit one of their hit a van and killed two of their grandkids or something. What would these Democrats do then, Michael? What would they say then if one of their kids was killed by an illegal alien? I mean, is that alone Kate Steinle got murdered and died in her father's arms? Is that not enough to build the wall? Kate Steinle was murdered on a pier with her dad, was walking and chatting with her dad, and she ends up dying right in her dad's arms, Michael? And these Democrats still don't get it? But if it was one of their kids or grandkids, what would happen then?
I'm sure they would basically say it's a tragedy, respect our privacy, and that's all that they would say, and the corporate media would try and make it go away. I mean, look at that shooting incident with that 7-year-old black girl, where at first everybody's saying, oh, the suspect was white, it was racially motivated, it's a hate crime, and everybody was going completely ballistic on this. Even the Young Turks got caught up in this, and then they've arrested 2 suspects, both of whom are black, and the story has just vanished from the corporate media because it doesn't serve the purpose of fanning up race hate in this country. It doesn't keep us divided.
Well, there you go, Michael. You know, you got to remember who's controlling the media, controls the mind of the... I call them the nitwits or dimwits, whatever you want to call it. But, you know, going back to this border wall, you're talking about a country that's being invaded by another group of people where they don't know the common language of our country. They don't speak English. Why aren't they going to South America? Why isn't Argentina taking them in, or Paraguay or Bolivia or Panama? Panama's got a great economy. Why do they go to Costa Rica or Ecuador? Why are they coming here?
Well, because Panama and Ecuador and Costa Rica, they've got secure borders, and they've got very strict immigration policies. I mean, there's an ad that runs on whatreallyhappened.com on how to emigrate to some of these places, and there's a process you have to go through. these people who are clustered down there at the southern border of the United States have been told that you can just walk up there, step over the border, and there will be free stuff. And again, I understand Trump's wall is a symbol. In a way, Pelosi is right. It's a monument to his administration, which is another reason why they don't want to see it get built. But the reality is it wouldn't be needed if the executive branch was enforcing Title VIII, including that provision that makes it a felony for any government official to aid and abet illegal immigrants. The laws are already on the books. The problem is they're not being enforced.
Well, I want to ask you this, Michael, and I know you got other callers probably. I'll let you go real quickly. The mayor of Oakland was telling these illegals that ICE is coming to get them. How come she wasn't arrested by the federal government? Why wasn't she arrested? Because look at here now. This lady was aiding and colluding, and telling these people, alarming them that they're going to be arrested, which is the law on the books. But Trump or nobody in California who has authority arrested that lady. Once that precedent was set, like the sanctuary cities, I can't believe that Trump is not telling his agents to go arrest these politicians. I don't care who they are. They're aiding and colluding and obstructing our federal judicial system with illegal invasion. There's no such thing as a sanctuary city for bank robbers or people are stealing food. But to me, you got a sanctuary city for all these illegals, and now you're going to get free health care in California and New York. These blue states are going to give them free health care so they can have I don't know why, because their voter rolls are already blue. They're not ever going to vote Republican. I mean, what are you trying to pad these rolls with millions of more voters? This is all about the changing of the demographic of the United States.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. They're bringing in all these third world population of the country at the same time. Planned Parenthood is trying to abort as many white babies as they possibly can. They are changing the demographic face of the United States of America.
Absolutely, Michael. And this is a massive conspiracy that is your radio show and John and James. You guys are exposing the truth, and the truth will set you free. And I'm telling you, this is just a wake-up call, because that wall will be built. I believe Trump will have to end up going with the option of building to Army Corps engineers. He's not going to get the votes from the Democrats. You're going to have to take the Army Corps engineers, build that wall, and that's it. Let them have this monument, because that's what we need. Okay?
Okay.
And that's what we need in this country. Look, like Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly but carry a big stick. That's it. That's it, Michael.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot for the phone call, Tom. We're going to let you go. All right, getting into the world of computers and computer surveillance, and it seems to just every day that goes by, you find out more and more how you're being abused. Apparently, Facebook is now being declared as crapware because it comes pre-installed on a lot of smartphones, including Samsung devices and iPhones. And because of the recent scandals of Facebook tracking people and sending that data off to who knows where, customers have decided they want to delete Facebook. They're closing their accounts, they're deleting their accounts, they want to delete the app. Surprise, surprise, you cannot remove the software from the Samsung devices. You can disable the app, but you don't know if it's still running in the background somewhere. Even worse, some Android apps are secretly sharing data with the Facebook app. So even if you're logged out of the social network and you don't have the Facebook app actually running, other apps on Android are sending it information. This is coming from an advocacy group, Privacy International. And they announced the findings at a presentation of the 35th Chaos Computer Congress last month. The organization tested 34 applications and documented the result and found that 61% of the apps tested automatically tell Facebook the user has opened the application. So apparently, yeah, it's an issue. Now, I understand that starting with iOS 12, pardon me, iPhone users have the option of deleting some of the embedded apps that come with the phone, including Facebook, which I'm going to be doing as soon as the show is over here. Tim Berners-Lee, who is considered the father of the World Wide Web, let's see, Mike in the control room is saying it took me a month. Actually, David in our control room said it took me a month in custom firmware to despook Android. Huge PTIA. I'll let you figure out what that last part means for yourself. Anyway, Tim Berners-Lee, the father of the World Wide Web, is out there launching a radical startup to try and take back the internet from Google and Facebook. He's apparently launching what he hopes will be a new massive startup social media that will break the dominance of Facebook, Google, and Amazon and allow users to basically take back control of their data. Well, my goodness, sign me up. All righty, here's a very alarming story. This is from Motherboard. And it turns out T-Mobile, Sprint, and AT&T are selling access to their customers' location data, and that data is ending up in the hands of pretty much anybody who wants it, even if they're not authorized. Now, supposedly, the customer's location data is to be made available to emergency first responders, to police, fire, ambulance. If you hit 911 and you can't talk, they know where you are. They pass that information on. But apparently, it's going on out to people not authorized to possess it. So this article, which appeared on motherboard.vice, they basically gave a bounty hunter $300. He then proceeded to locate a designated cell phone. Now, let me give you a reason why that could be a bad thing. Let's say you live in Los Angeles and you decide to drive to Las Vegas for the weekend. And criminals have set up this operation where they're accessing all of this location data for phones, and they're watching all these cars on the road from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, and so they know you are away from home, and they empty the place by the time you get back. Now, here's a little bit of good news. Mayor Reed McGuire has nominated Julian Assange for a Nobel Peace Prize. And I hope that the Nobel Committee atones for past misdeeds like Henry Kissinger, Barack Obama, Al Gore, and Barack Obama by giving it to Julian Assange. Not because I think Assange deserves it, although I'm not going to say that he doesn't, but if he is a Nobel Peace Prize winner, it's going to make it much more difficult for the United States to demonize him when they get their clutches back onto him as well. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How are you? Hey, did Layla call today?
Yes, she did.
Okay, good. She seemed a little upset yesterday.
Well, we were both a little upset yesterday.
She's one of your best callers. I'd hate to lose her.
Well, you know, she did call back today, so I don't think we're going to lose her anytime soon.
Oh, good. Yeah, you know, it's sad. I mean, you have all these lunatic Democrats, but then, you know, the only option we have is the other party, the Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get the first act of the year is the anti-BDS law or act.
Yeah, the first thing the Senate did. Now, that's on hold. The Senate has realized the optics on that were bad, so they're not going to debate it or bring it to the floor until after the government shutdown ends, because they're realizing just how incredibly bad that looked, that with all the things that are going wrong with this country, the first thing the new Senate does is, oh, Israel, bless Israel, end of BDS. Plus, a lot of people are now coming on the realization that criminalizing BDS is an attack on our First Amendment right to freedom of speech, and they're not happy with that at all. They're not happy seeing our brand new Senate basically attacking one of the core principles of our constitutional republic on behalf of a foreign government. That's not making people happy, and that's why they're backing off moving forward with this bill until after the government shutdown. I think they're waiting for some point when there's something else in the news cycle that they can sort of hide behind, and then they'll try and rush it through. But there are already court challenges against these rules and laws criminalizing BDS. It's going to wind up in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it's outrageous. I mean, absolutely unconstitutional. And it's just, that's, I mean, I think even the Zionists are embarrassed with that. Like, they overreach. Like, hey, this doesn't look good. This is too obvious.
Well, I think the reason the Zionists are pushing for this criminalization of BDS is because they're losing the public debate. The world is watching what's been going on in Gaza and the West Bank, and Israel's propaganda about they're all terrorists and they want to exterminate us, and it's falling on deaf ears because everybody can see the military disparity between mighty Israel, which has nuclear weapons, and all kinds of other weapons supplied by the U.S. taxpayer, versus Gaza and the West Bank, where they're basically throwing stones at the Israelis. So since they can't propagandize BDS out of existence, they're trying to get countries around the world to criminalize it, many of whom have. But here in the United States, it's going to have to pass a Supreme Court challenge on the First Amendment. I would be very shocked if the Supreme Court carved out an Israel exemption to the First Amendment. And if they do, I would say we're one step closer to mass rioting in this country.
Yeah, I think it's just, you get the worst of both worlds. You get, the Democrats have lost their minds with this crazy talk. But then, like, our only alternative is Republicans. And look what they do. They pass this, or they put up this anti-BDS law. It's like you get the worst from both.
Yeah, unfortunately you do. Anyway, listen, Jim, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of our program today here. So we're going to fill this last segment with human-caused global warming. And as you know, there is a major storm blasting across Europe. Hundreds of people are trapped in their homes in the alpine regions. There have been avalanches. At least 12 people have been killed, most of them in avalanches. In Austria, hundreds of residents are stuck in their homes due to the blocked roads. Power outages, snow-laden trees took down the power lines. It is really bad. Apparently, they're expecting up to 10 feet of snow in Austria. There are 1,000 miles of ski slopes closed out of concern for safety because of the avalanches. And when you know that they're closing the ski resorts, you know it is a cold, rough winter. Another story, this one coming out of the Express in Great Britain. Europe to be hit by a meter of snow, and the Met Office is issuing a weather warning saying that there's going to be showers of snow and sleet. They are still not saying what's going to happen to Great Britain, but we'll see. Anyway, let's see. Britain is braced for a Siberian snow bomb. There's a freezing Arctic triple storm vortex set to batter Great Britain until March. They're going to have a month-long storm. It's going to probably look like a scene like right out of Day After Tomorrow. Over in Reno, 30 inches of snow fell at the Diamond Peak ski area, 4 inches at the Reno airport. And again, getting back to the Alps, in the Austrian and Bavarian Alps, heavy snowfalls have left areas paralyzed, with more than 2,000 people trapped in villages and ski resorts cut off from the outside world. 5 people have been killed, 2 more are missing. The entire Austrian ski resort of Hochkar was evacuated on Monday amid fears of avalanches. They brought everybody down from the mountain, both guests and staff. That's never happened before in the history of Hochkars, but they're saying they can't make any guarantees of safety right now. Apparently 3 feet of snow fell in just 24 hours. And they're saying the problem is not the total depth of snow, but that more than a meter of snow has been added in such a short time, because it doesn't get a chance to pack down, which makes the possibility of an avalanche that much greater. Over on the West Coast, they're having a major winter storm, 350,000 homes without power, cars trapped in mudslides. Again, this is because of all those places where they had those wildfires earlier the year, or rather late last year. The ground cover has not grown back, so when the rain comes on down, and I remember those Southern California storms, they could get really very intense, but they're expecting high elevation snow before the end of the week. I remember one time, after my first marriage and before I met Claire, I was doing a lot of rag setting out in the Channel Islands. And I remember there was one time we were in at Two Harbors at Catalina, and we could see there was a storm coming in. And for some reason, our captain, he owned the boat, it was his boat, and he had his master's papers, he got up early and he sailed us out from the harbor before the rest of us were even awake because he wanted to test his ship and his crew. So we got to sail across from Catalina to San Pedro in the teeth of a November storm, and that was the last time I talked to him for a very, very long time, because that was a very dangerous thing to do. I began to wonder if he had a death wish. All right, article. Actually, we're coming up here on the end of the show, so please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots and lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody else that you can. Please donate to RBN. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.